Now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, September the 20th, 2023. Another day, another meeting in the Middle East, more controversy. Joe Biden is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. God knows what they're going to talk about. Axios describes the meeting as much anticipated. I'm not actually sure that's true. I wonder if the reverse is true. Politico suggests that they are meeting to discuss hard issues. Thomas Friedman, who's, in my view, at least done more damage to Middle Eastern relations than almost any other individual on earth, has written the shortest column ever, giving advice to Joe Biden about how to deal with Israel. He's never succeeded in the past. Meanwhile, the Iranians, as always, are up to their own tricks. The Iranians have accused that in a UN speech of stoking the Ukrainian war. And Israel's ambassador apparently walked out to protest the speech. It's a three-way relationship. I'm not sure what Freud would make of it. United States, Israel, and Iran. One man who's given this odd relationship a great deal of thought is my guest today. Ilan Evyatar is the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report. He's based in Israel. He's a very prominent and distinguished Israeli journalist. And he's the co-author of Target Tehran, How Israel is Using Sabotage, Cyber Warfare, Assassination, and Secret Diplomacy to Stop a Nuclear Iran and Create a New Middle East. It's a controversial book written with Yonah Jeremy Bob. And as I said, Ilan is joining us from, where are you, Ilan, in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem?
I'm in Jerusalem.
So is this the classic three-way thing, Ilan? Israel, Iran, and the United States all playing off each other?
Well, they're certainly playing off each other, and there's another three-way relationship that's going on, which is Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, who are trying to put together a normalization deal with the shadow of Iran hanging over them.
So let's talk about the book. It doesn't, I have to admit, it doesn't come as a great surprise to me that Israel's using sabotage, cyber warfare, assassination, and secret diplomacy to stop a nuclear Iran. What are you saying in the book, Target Tehran, that hasn't been said before about this covert war between Israel and Iran?
I think we're saying a lot that hasn't been said before, and what we're doing that hasn't been done before is presenting a book that is very much up to date. Normally, books about espionage deal with events that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago or whatever, and we're dealing with events that happened, just a few years ago, and in fact with events that are ongoing. Israel's war with Iran is a very long war. It's a war that's been going on for close to 40 years, and it continues to go on. It will continue to go on either until there is regime change or until Israel has managed to stop Iran from gaining nuclear weapons, which will make it a far more aggressive towards Israel than it is even today.
Ilan, I'm not sure if you meant to put it in these words, but you talked about Israel's war with Iran. Did you mean that?
Yes, it most definitely is a war. It's taking place at various levels. It's taking place at the covert level, where Israel is conducting, according to foreign reports, as we say here, to be within the rules of the censor. Israel is said to be conducting assassinations. It's conducted a number of covert operations. It's admitted to some of them. It admitted to the heist of the nuclear archive in Iran. In Syria, where Iran is trying to entrench itself and build forward positions against Israel, it is conducting sometimes almost daily operations, military operations. So yes, it is a war. There have been direct confrontations between the sides, and the Iranians too are engaging in covert operations. They just haven't been as successful. Israel has stopped just last week. The head of Mossad, the present head of Mossad, David Barnea, said that Israel had stopped 27 attempted Iranian terrorist attacks against Israeli and Jewish targets around the world.
Remember that famous scene in Casablanca where somebody says they were shocked with the behavior of the Germans or the British in this secret war, in this Cold War, in the Second World War. Should we be, quote unquote, shocked by all this in that Casablanca ironic sense, Ilan? I mean, none of this is particularly surprising. Were you shocked by this? You're an insider, you're a journalist in Israel. Is there something outrageous about this, or is this business as usual for a country surrounded by many different enemies for the last almost 100 years?
Well, in many ways, it is business as usual. Like you say, Israel is or has been surrounded by enemies on many fronts, and this war with Iran has been going on for such a long time that in many ways it is business as usual. Was I shocked? No, I wasn't shocked, but the scope of operations is enormous by any standard.
How does it compare to other covert wars? How does it, for example, compare to the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union after the Second World War?
That's an interesting question, and it's something we in fact discuss in the book. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett adopted in the short period that he was prime minister. He told us that his tactic was inspired by the Cold War. He called it death by 1,000 cuts. He wanted to constantly attack and undermine Iran to eventually bring down the regime in the way that the Soviet Union eventually fell.
You mentioned this has been going on for almost 50 years since the fall of the Shah, since the Iranian Revolution. Does it cut across parties? I mean, for most of that period, of course, it's the right, it's Likud that's been in power. But is this a consensus Cold War against Iran that unites left and right, military
Absolutely.
and civilian in Israel?
Absolutely. I think pretty much across the spectrum, everybody in Israel feels that Iran is a huge threat to Israel. Iran threatens Israel, so that's probably one of the only issues in Israel where there is consensus, especially at the present time.
You're based in Israel, and as your co-author is, how'd you get all your info about Tehran? What don't we know about Iran that you'd like to know? Is there the same consensus within Iran about this Cold War with Israel?
I don't think there is a consensus within Iran, because you have the section of the population that supports the regime. So I think there is a consensus within Iran. But then you also have the other forces in Iran, the forces that want to see a Western liberal democracy in Iran. Iran is a very educated country. Iran is a huge country, and let's not forget that Israel and Iran used to be, until the rise of the Islamic Republic, Israel and Iran were best of friends. I know many people who used to live in Iran, not undercover. They were working in Iran for Israeli companies. They were very, very close relationships.
One of the things, Ilan, I've never really understood, and maybe this is a bit of a dumb, all my questions are pretty dumb, but this particularly dumb, is I've never really understood why the Iranian regime, the revolutionary Iranian regime that replaced the Shah, why they're so obsessed with Israel. Why? There's no strategic threat, really. There's no particular association with Palestine and with the Palestinian people. What is it about Israel that has defined, or at least seems to define, Iranian foreign policy, Hezbollah, and everything else?
You're very right in saying that the Iranians are obsessed with Israel, but it's been so since the very beginning. The first foreign leader to come to Iran after the Islamic Revolution was Yasser Arafat, and the Iranians gave him as a gift the Israeli embassy in Tehran. He stood on the balcony of the embassy in front of a crowd shouting Khomeini Arafat, Khomeini Arafat. And Khomeini promised him that the first thing that they would do after stabilizing the revolution was to march to Jerusalem. So I think there's also a deep ideological element behind all of that.
But why? The Iranians aren't Arabs.
No.
I know some people we've had on the show will probably explain it in terms of just being against the Jews, which is an easy explanation. It's hard to prove one way or the other. Is there more to it than that, Ilan?
Well, I think, for a revolutionary regime, it's always great to have an enemy. And in addition to its war with Iraq, the beginning of the revolution, which it didn't choose, it chose two enemies for itself. One is Israel, the little Satan, and the other is the United States, the great Satan. And it's always been the case that when someone wants to lead the Muslim world, they take a tough position on Israel, and they speak out on Israel, and they try to gain a certain hegemony in that way.
Hasn't it made them somewhat archaic and absurd? No one else, it seems, in the Muslim world, outside Iran, officially at least, seems to care that much about Israel anymore. Particularly, of course, in the Gulf. And I know we're going to talk about the Gulf and this other three-way relationship with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. But do you think there are people within the regime who are just tired of all this, don't see any upside, no benefit, certainly not in economic or military terms?
I think, well, first of all, I mean, it's not a regime where sort of people can express a different opinion. And there are the so-called reformists within the regime, but they too take a hard line on Israel. It's not that the reformists say, let's reach out and let's make peace with Israel. So I think as long as this regime is in power, then this confrontation between Israel and Iran is going to be ongoing.
There are always divisions within authoritarian regimes. Talked about the Cold War. Within the old Soviet Union, as it collapsed, there were great divisions. I mean, even in Stalin's Russia, there were ideological divisions amongst his followers. Surely there are divisions within Iran.
I imagine there are tactical divisions, but it does seem that ideologically, I mean, no one has come out and said, let's take a different stance on Israel. Let's reach out to Israel. The Sunni Arabs are reaching out to Israel, so let's reach out as well. That simply hasn't happened.
Why does Iran want the bomb? Is it to become a regional power? Is it to stand up for Israel, or is it simply become a symbol of standing up to the two great Satans, the United States and Israel, and perhaps even the Sunni world?
I think Iran has seen how regimes that have the bomb find it far more easier to guarantee their survival.
What, Pakistan? What do you mean?
Well, look at North Korea. No one will invade North Korea because North Korea has the bomb. Also, Iran has a long-standing and historical sectarian dispute, not with Israel, but with its Sunni neighbors. So yes, it wants to be the regional hegemon, and it also wants to guarantee its survival.
Title of your book, Ilan, Target Tehran, suggests that maybe the Israelis would like to invade Iran. Has there ever been talk of that?
No, but there's certainly been talk of conducting a strike on Iran to stop its nuclear program. Israel sees a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat.
Is that feasible, though? I mean, most of what, and you've obviously, know a lot more about this than I do, but my understanding is that it's not feasible to do that, and if it was, they would have done it.
Well, I think that there was a period between 2010 and 2012 where Israel was apparently very close to launching an attack on Iran, but it didn't have the backing of the United States. We relate in the book an incident where George Bush sort of beat on the table and told Ehud Barak, the defense minister at the time, that, don't you understand? No is no. So, Israel didn't have the international support that it needs to do so. But then on the other hand, Israel's doctrine, the Begin doctrine, instituted by Menachem Begin when he attacked the Iraqi nuclear facility, is that Israel will under no circumstances allow a hostile regime to gain a nuclear weapon.
Is Iran as convenient an enemy for Israel as Israel is for Iran? Do they feed off each other?
No, I think my personal opinion is for the current leadership that certain, using the fear of Iran is something that it leverages for political gain. So yes, I would say yes.
And how does it play, Ilan? How does it play domestically in terms of this ongoing issue over land internally within Israel?
Over land, or the ongoing issue with the judicial reform?
Well, everything. I mean, with domestic politics, with the issue of one state, two states, who gets what bit of land.
I mean, I think where it really comes into play at the moment is with the whole judicial reform, overhaul, coup, whatever you would like to call it. The result has been that Netanyahu has weakened Israel's own hand. We see pilots, reserve pilots, reserve members of special forces units, reserve members of intelligence units, other vital military personnel not turning up to volunteer for their reserve service. So that weakens Israel and makes its threat less credible at the current time.
So in a sense, maybe Bibi Netanyahu is doing Tehran's business by dividing the country so dramatically.
I think he's certainly, I don't know if he's doing Tehran's business, but I personally certainly don't think he's doing Israel any favors. I mean, the other day he compared demonstrators who are turning up to protest against him at during his visit to the United States. He compared them with Iran and the PLO. So I think, yes, he's definitely causing internal division that weakens Israel's hands.
I'm guessing that the hardliners in Tehran rather like the hardliner in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I think at the moment, yes, you're right.
Well, there's not much we can do, Ilan, but it's a fascinating subject. Target Tehran, how Israel is using sabotage, cyber warfare, assassination, and secret diplomacy to stop a nuclear Iran and create a new Middle East. I want to take a short break now, Ilan, and then I want to talk about this other this weird three-way relationship with Saudi and the Abraham Accords and how that might potentially change everything. So we're going to take a short break, thank our sponsor, Liberties, and then we'll be back with Ilan Evyatar, one of Israel's leading journalists and experts on its very complicated and dangerous relationship with Iran. So we'll be back in a second.
Thank you.
Beyond the news, the noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought. A quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
And you can check out more about Liberties at libertiesjournal.com. You can even subscribe. We are talking with the great Ilan Evyatar, co-author of Target Tehran. He doesn't like looking at himself, but he wants you all to read his new book, which is an important book. Ilan, at the beginning, we talked about these parallel weird three ways. We talked about Israel, United States, and Iran before the break. What about this Saudi thing? Saudi, US, and the United States, the Abraham Accords, which many people have come on the show and suggested was actually an achievement of the Trump regime, if that's the right word. Is there anything in it? What do you make of these not Trump Accords, Abraham Accords?
I think they're very important for Israel. I think we appear to be very close to normalization with the Saudis. I think it's a question not of if it will happen, but when it will happen. So the question is, will it happen now before the next U.S. elections? And the question is, what price each side will have to pay? Everybody wants something. It's going to be a deal with a lot of hard currency. The Saudis. They want Israeli technologies. They want American technologies, American weapons. They want a defense pact. They want trade routes to Europe. They want a civil nuclear program. Biden wants a strong foreign policy achievement. He wants to edge out China, which has also been making inroads into Saudi Arabia and has its own Belt and Road initiative. He wants also to in quotes, save Israeli democracy. He wants to put pressure on Israel. He wants the deal to go so far as to cause Netanyahu to have to give up his very extreme right-wing partners, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Israel wants to see peace with Saudi. Obviously, has endless upsides for Israel, economic. Basically means the end of the conflict, more or less, with most of the Arab world. Many other countries will follow in Saudi Arabia's wake if there is normalization. But then it has challenges as well. The Saudis want this advanced weaponry. Israel needs to maintain what it calls its qualitative military edge. Netanyahu has to balance all of this with his whole domestic political situation. Can he push through a deal and keep his coalition? Will he have to partner with the opposition, with Benny Gantz, with Yair Lapid? And then there are the Palestinians. They have to balance out not putting up demands that will make it impossible for the Saudis to make peace. The Saudis have made it very clear that they don't want the Palestinians to veto their own interests. We quote one diplomat in the book who says, in Riyadh, they don't want any plonkers in Ramallah setting the tone for them. So it's a very complex.
I know that word, Ilan, but not everyone will know the meaning of the word plonker. What does it mean?
I think a plonker is it's a bit of an idiot, no?
Or a schmuck in Yiddish, probably.
Schmuck.
I don't think plonker I think it's a British term, not a Yiddish term.
No, is it a British or American term? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think it's British. I don't
know. So it's a very, very complex puzzle, with thousands of moving pieces, and it's going to take complex and tortuous negotiations to put it together.
And then, of course, you didn't mention Iran. How much is the Saudi initiative here driven by their hostility to Iran?
Well, the Saudis have just made their own sort of arrangement with Iran. They've restored diplomatic ties which had been cut for a few years. But all the intelligence sources we spoke to who are in contact with the Saudis said that isn't going to make a difference in the long term. The Saudi-Iranian distrust of each other still exists. The Saudis are very fearful of an Iranian nuclear weapon, and in fact, basically, it is the fear of Iran that brought Israel and the Gulf nations together.
And that fear, is it driven by religion, by the Sunni Shia thing? Is it driven by ethnicity, the Persian Arab thing, or is it driven by politics, the radical Islamic versus conservative Islamic thing?
I think it's driven by all of those factors. There's the historical Shiite Sunni divide. There's the Persian Arab issue. The Persians feel themselves very much superior to the Arabs, but I think the main factor is that this Islamic regime, so-called, is one that wants to export the revolution and one that wants to have hegemony over the region.
And what about MBS? What do you make of him? Does he know what he's doing?
Yeah, I think he's very bright, very driven. I think he wants to completely change the face of Saudi Arabia. He wants to modernize the country. He wants to liberalize the country in certain ways, obviously while retaining his own autocracy. And he wants to prepare the country for the post-fossil fuel era, and he has a rapidly growing young population that he needs to find employment for. So that's very much part of the Saudi interest. The Saudis are building this mega project of NEOM on the Red Sea coast, which is not that far away from Israel, and not coincidentally. And they need technologies. They need everything from IT to desert farming techniques to water, the works.
And surveillance technology. We've done
surveillance technology. Indeed.
So I mean, this will be if MBS is the Peter the Great or the Catherine the Great of Saudi Arabia, or the wannabe Peter or Catherine of Saudi Arabia. He has his Jeremy Bentham to create this panopticon in this new city. So let's say you just said, and it's when, if not if, although in the Middle East, when can be a long time.
Right.
But let's say there is peace, so to speak, between Israel and the Gulf and the Saudis in particular. The price is right, and they negotiate and haggle over everything. How does that change the relationship between Israel and Iran?
I think it makes it more difficult for Iran to take hostile actions against Israel. But I think Iran will still try to become, at the very least, a nuclear threshold state. But with the peace with the Saudi and other Gulf nations, in fact, this is already happening. There are various overt defense ties, and there are various defense ties that we don't know too much about. But there are supposedly, they're building this region-wide radar alert system under the umbrella of CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, and that strengthens Israel's hand against Iran. Will it end hostilities between the sides? Absolutely not.
It's a little chilling, though, in the sense that Israel and Saudi are probably in agreement about regime change in Tehran. Certainly the Americans have always been in favor of regime change. Is there a danger of this whole thing spiraling out of control, becoming internationalized and drawing in the Russians and the Chinese?
I don't see the Russians and the Chinese getting involved in conflict, but they have huge
Well, if
influence.
there was a war, some sort of increasingly over war in a new Middle East against Iran, wouldn't the Chinese certainly wouldn't just stay out of it, would they?
I don't see the Chinese getting involved. I think the Chinese, they have a phrase, they like to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. I mean, in this particular case, they don't have an interest in seeing Iran involved in a fight. They have huge economic interests in Iran. The Russians are currently doing a lot of weapons business with Iran to support their war effort in Ukraine. They're getting thousands of suicide drones from Iran. They're supplying or have signed a contract to supply modern fighter jets to Iran, missile technology to Iran. But
yeah,
I don't
we'll
see.
have to see. Maybe we got the Ukrainian crisis. We may have a Taiwanese crisis, and then an Iranian crisis. It's in all the great powers' interest to leave the other crises alone. I know you were talking about when, not if, and 5 years in Silicon Valley, where I am, Ilan, is a long time. Where would you estimate, and I'll get you back on the show in 5 years' time, where are we going to be in 5 years' time, both in terms of this relationship or lack of relationship, this covert war between Israel and Iran, and the peace initiative between Saudi and Israel?
Well, let's start with the peace initiative. Obviously, no one can look into the crystal ball and say, when an agreement will be signed. But there are two things here. One is that there are things happening on the ground already in the absence of a peace agreement. There is intelligence sharing between Israel and Saudi Arabia. There are Israeli business people going to Saudi Arabia very openly on foreign passports. We know that MBS meets with Israelis that have foreign passports. There was a couple of Israeli sports teams that have been in Saudi Arabia, even with Israeli passports, because they're going to international events. The Saudis are investing in Israel via third parties, such as Jared Kushner's private equity fund. So there's lots happening already on the ground. So I think even if we don't see a full agreement, we'll continue to see strengthening ties on the ground, very much in the way that that was the case between Israel and the United Arab Emirates before the signing of the Abraham Accords. And as for Iran, there are a couple of depends obviously on the Iranians how far forward they will push their program. If they decide to take steps that Israel sees as crossing the nuclear threshold, I believe that Israel will strike. There are a couple of points in time when certain sections of the JCPOA, which the United States has pulled out of, expire, when there are no limits on centrifuges, when there are no limits on enrichment. So those could be danger points in the future and around late 2024 through 2025. But obviously it very much depends on what the Iranians decide to do and what Israeli intelligence estimates or analyzes that they are doing.
So out of all this muddle, we're going to get one peace and one war, Ilan.
Very possible. But let's hope that peace with Saudi Arabia will, in some ways, constrain the Iranians and persuade them that it's not worth continuing down that path.
And then the ball then is entirely in the Iranian court when it comes to whether or not there's a war. Got nothing to do with Israel.
I don't think Israel will initiate a war with Iran if Iran doesn't take further forward measures on its nuclear program, and if there's another parallel to Iran's nuclear program. Iran has another strategy, which is to surround Israel with what it calls a ring of fire. So you have Hezbollah, to Israel's north, and you have the forward Iranian proxy positions in Syria to the northeast, and you have Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is basically an Iranian proxy in Gaza to the south, and you have the Houthis in Yemen that are also capable of firing missiles against Israel. So military action on that front is also possible. There are those who in Israel who believe that Israel should initiate a war with Hezbollah to cut down its capabilities, and also so that if there is a war with Iran, if there is a need to strike Iran, then that has been basically conducted in two stages.